mean, go look at photos from the 20s and 30s, the 90s. Yeah, look at those photos and go like, "Oh, hey, they didn't have all of this stuff, and they were still capable of creating amazing." Like Ansel Adams was not out there like shooting at
F2.
128,000 ISO.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a knock against new gear, but it's that you don't necessarily need it to create wonderful images.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are chatting with wedding photographer Casey Fatchett about why your gear is better than you think and why the newest equipment actually won't help you to take better photos. But first, the Beginner Photography Podcast is brought to you by CloudSpot. Simplify your business with studio management, organize clients, send professional contracts, automate invoice payments, and more. Keeping track of everything just got a whole lot easier. Grab your free forever account at deliverphotos.com and only upgrade when your business is ready. You know, on top of being a wedding photographer, Casey is also the host of the Nerdy Photographer podcast. And he's also been on the Beginner Photography podcast before, back in episode 362, where we actually gave you tips on how to be a bad wedding photographer. It was kind of in our little attempt at an April Fool's joke, but it's all through the lens of what not to do as a wedding photographer. It was a good one. Casey has a ton of experience shooting weddings. It was a great conversation. But in today's interview with Casey, you're going to learn three things. One, how limitations, like, you know, when you see and drool over the newest gear, but your wallet just laughs at you, how to use that limitation to foster your creativity. Why you should never apologize, air quotes there, for the gear that you use, and how the constraints of, again, air quotes, older gear will help you to better learn the art of photography. And lastly, why focusing on developing a unique artistic vision rather than simply mimicking the trend of the day will actually yield more appeal from those who follow your work. So with that, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with Casey Fatchett. Man, last time you were on, Casey, we talked about ChatGPT, so it feels like it
Yeah,
wasn't that long ago, right? But
it feels
now,
like it wasn't, but it's been 2 years.
yeah, right. Like it's so strange to think of how long we've now had AI in our lives and stuff. I thought that was a fun conversation, and I've had people reach out to me as well and kind of share a lot of the same sentiments, which is great. But
That's a very interesting thing, and I mean, I've started using it for a variety of stuff, like including things we talked about. Like for me, it's coming up with the titles for
mhm,
the podcast episodes, and it's become much more interesting titles to me
I
because I mean, like
agree.
take them, I look at the suggestions, I give it like, and then I merge things together and make it my own. But it helps eliminate the sort of for drudgery tasks for me, like coming up with ideas. But also, I always tell people now this is the worst it's going to be
Right.
from here on out,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's what scares me in some ways. I was following two different Instagram accounts for well over a month that I did not realize were
AI?
all AI.
Really? Images and everything? Was
All
it like a photography based account or what?
yes, they
What?
even put in the espoused as photographers,
Ugh.
and it took one of them is like this very kind of avant-garde fashion looking stuff. So I mean, it kind of like lent itself to it, but it looked the faces, the hands. There were stuff like full body shots, movement, like people moving. When I was like, this is oh okay, great photos. And then there was some stuff that was applications and stuff. I'm like, okay, well there's some graphic design elements on top of things. I'm like, oh, this is multimedia esque type looking stuff, but I didn't think anything of it. And then one day there was one that was just like very obvious, looks like Alice in Wonderland,
Oh,
very typical AI type of look photo, and I'm like, or image, and I'm like, what? And so I start scrolling back, and way down at the bottom of the captions, hashtag AI art, like
that's how they get
there's
you.
these giant ass captions. There was a whole other one that was like this person was saying that it was landscape photography
Hmm. Landscape
of
photography.
actual places, like naming the place. Again, this giant caption, which I'm sure was AI generated.
Of course.
And then at the very bottom, this is not an actual photo. This is my imagination, what my imagination of what this place looks like, AI generated, whatever. But then in the comments, people would be like, oh, this is an awesome photo. And then be like, oh, thanks, man. Like,
Wow.
it's not a photo. It's not a
Were these
photo. Like,
places that were being named there, were they actual places or were
yes.
they were actual
Yeah, they're actual locations.
Oh
And it
my
looks
gosh.
pretty simple because I'm sure they were just feeding in like generate an image of
Sure.
such and such or whatever. And this guy, like when you get called out on it, he's like, well, I can't go to these places to take the pictures, but this is how I can do that. I'm like, no, you're
It's
not
the
taking
worst.
pictures.
Oh my
You're not
gosh.
taking pictures. You're using somebody else's photos of that
Right.
place to generate images.
It's not your imagination. It's the other photographer's imagination. Or it's not even
Right.
imagination at that point, but it's their actual work that's anyway.
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation. But this kind of leads me into, I guess, my first question for you, which is right before we started hitting record, you were talking about your film cameras. I was going to say new film cameras, but you've had them for a number
I
of
do
years.
have a new film camera.
So wait.
I had
Wait, I want to frame this question, okay? Because this is something that I've been getting into, and I want to know, are other people doing this as well? Have you found more of a draw towards film photography because there is such ease and fakeness in AI art now that you're looking for
ooh,
something real and tangible?
wow, we just got really deep. I think it might be some sort of backlash to that sort of generation of images. That might be the subkernel. I have to talk to my therapist about that. Um,
There's an AI
I think
chatbot
there's
therapist you could talk to.
I'm sure there are many. The thing that got me for this was why I got back into it specifically and on a conscious level was because I'd been feeling a little stale creatively. And I think that we get comfortable in a way with our process, how we take photos, how we do things, and you get into this pattern of how you like create images. And for me, it was I needed to really stop, break it down to the basics again, and really be intentional about what I was doing. And when you've got a manual focus lens, and film, which you cannot see the outcome of whatever you took, you really have to think, and you have a limited number of images that you can capture. You really have to break down the process a lot differently than you do when you're shooting digitally. You spend more thought power on what is the image that I'm capturing than I think that digital lends itself to an ease of creation, which in some ways is good. Depends on what you're shooting. Like I would never go out and shoot a wedding entirely on film if I had the choice to shoot digitally as well. Like I want to make sure that I can get the photos that I want to deliver to my clients, and they deserve to know that. I mean, I'm capturing everything according to my artistic vision. But I think this is as an exercise, and I have some projects that I'm working on with film, is helping me reevaluate my creative process and like pushing me in different directions and making me think about the process differently.
How so? Like, what directions are you being pushed in?
Really getting down to like, because these are also like fully manual cameras, there's no aperture priority, there's no shutter priority. Really thinking about what kind of picture I want to take because I might think to myself, if I'm shooting digitally, I want something that's, I want to have a longer shutter speed here or whatever. And like, I can't change my ISO. There's a lot of limitations that you have to work your way around to get the image that you see in your head. So you have to be very clear about the image that you're seeing in your head and not just kind of want something like this. You have to be a lot more focused on that and like the light. And I have a limited focus window depending on what I'm trying to photograph, or I have to be really good on the manual focus, like depending on what it is. Yeah, so it's like really thinking about those things. And again, the limited number of exposures. There's no trial and error. Hey, you can't see what you're capturing anyway, but
Right.
like you have a limited room and to work it.
Yeah.
Um,
I have found that when I first transitioned from video essentially into photography, I started with film, and it was like that. There was that focus knowing like I only have 36 chances to get the photo that I want. And I found that like for me, my progression of film photography changed a lot where I went from, I was almost reserving film for like, I'm going to save this for the best of the best, like those most artistic moments. But then I would critique everything that I would see as, is this good enough? Right. I would question myself. Is this good enough? Is this going to lend itself to film? And then once I changed that mindset to thinking every time I go out, I'm going to shoot an entire roll of film. Like I have to shoot the entire roll of film. I feel like everything changed at that point because now I was trying to limit myself to like one or two photos at a time when really, when you open that up to 36 photos, it feels like a
right.
whole new universe.
It
And
feels
it's great.
enormous once you've like gotten yourself in that mindset of, oh, there's only X number of exposures. Like you said, there's that initial response is I can only take like, oh crap, like how many have I have? What I found also equally, I don't know, it's weird is I use different numbers of exposures. I have rolls of film that are like 36. I have ones that are 24,
Yeah.
and I have rolls that are 10.
10.
10 exposures. Yeah, it was like a gift pack of some kind.
Uh,
Like that, I've got like 8 rolls of just like 10 exposure film, and it's like, huh, okay, this will make me think differently about what I'm shooting than if I had 24 rolls or 24 exposures or 36, and how I approach each thing. Like differently depending on the number of exposures that I have.
mhm.
So yeah, it's a interesting mind exercise and creative exercise.
And yet, you know what I was just thinking of? Have you heard of that experiment? I don't know what college it was, but it was like a photography
Just
professor who took his class and split it into two groups. He took one group and said, for the entire semester, you can only take one photo, and it has to be the best photo, right? But for the other group, he said, you have to take 100 photos a day. Take as many photos as humanly possible. And then at the end, select your best photo, right? And it was like the group that could only take one photo for the entire semester, they all hated their photos. And like on a grading scale, they were all much worse than the people who took hundreds of photos throughout the semester, which
right.
in my head says, okay, you get more practice, you get more reps in, you're going to be better at it. But at the same time, almost seems counterintuitive here because with digital, you can take 1,000 photos a day instead of, say, 36 at a time with film. I don't know where I was going with that. Do you got to?
I, yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that gets that because if you're learning photography, and we're always learning, you should never stop learning. But there's an element of the practice of it gets you like looking for better images or just a better sense of what you're trying to do as opposed to I feel like there's if you're only allowed to take one photo, that's really weird. I
Yeah.
think that's like yeah, okay, for an entire semester, it's like, oh, what am I even going to take a picture of? The limitation is too much. Like it's too narrow. If you said you can only take one picture a day, I think that would be a more interesting limitation to put on it. Or if you said like, oh, you could, yeah, I mean, yeah, one picture a day. So that like, each day you're like consciously and intentionally thinking about, okay, I can only take one image, and then you have to pick out your favorite out of all of those.
Right.
That's different than saying like you can take as many pictures as you want because I feel yeah you're going to learn something over that time of repeated
Practice.
exercise and
Yeah.
practice that okay this is now what I'm looking for. Now that I think about it, that could be a very interesting project.
Yeah.
um
What, to take
but
like hundreds of photos a day versus one photo?
no, one photo a day. I think
Hmm.
one photo a day would be like you really have to. I think this is a thing that a lot of I'm not being ageist here, but a lot of younger photographers tend to fall into trend traps
Hmm.
because they see that gets a lot of likes or it gets a lot of comments or whatever, instead of doing something intentionally and like really thinking about what the end goal is other than, you know,
Attention.
getting likes and comments and really thinking about your artistic intention. So they just sort of like fall into the I'm just going to do the trendy thing and not thinking about why. What is the purpose, your artistic vision, other than to gather attention?
Yeah.
So I think that if you give people an unlimited number of exposures to work with, there's sort of less pressure. There's like you need a little bit of focus and pressure to like form a diamond through pressure.
Right.
And if I was teaching a class, I was telling somebody who was just learning photography, I would say like go out and practice as much as you can
Hmm.
because most people don't practice a lot. But if I was teaching a class where I'm specifically trying to get to some endpoint with people, I would never say like you can only take one photo and you can take as many as you want. I would tell people that like one photo a day, I think would be a great idea to make people gather their artistic thought. And not every day is going to be a winner. That's something that everybody can learn from. Like just because it's like doesn't work doesn't mean like you learn something from that. Like
Yeah.
if you're not going to take a chance, and that's one of the things I really like about shooting film right now is that I get the images back like a month later.
Hmm.
It's not like I immediately see it and I see it and I come back and I go like, huh, I guess that didn't work out. I guess I should, or when I go back to that, I should do it differently. Or like this one really came out like great, but it's different than what I thought it was going to be.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like those sorts of that experience of going like, oh, I'm really retracing my thought process from when I was out there taking the photo and now seeing what the result was and using that to learn and adapt to what I'm going to try to do next time.
Yeah. Well, I
It,
think
it's it,
one of the things that like I find with a lot of new photographers as well is that there's almost this like so like those cameras that you have, maybe they're I don't know, take a guess. Like how old do you think they are?
They're probably like 50 years old.
Okay, so like 50 years old, and yet like they still work, which speaks
Yeah,
obviously to film. They're made out of metal. These are built like a tank,
they're
right?
they're
Which
they
is
are not this is as heavy. Like one of these with a little lens on it is just as heavy as like a DSLR with
right,
a big
like a
lens.
flagship camera. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
brick.
But like at the same time, new cameras today, they go obsolete much quicker, right? And even like right now, maybe not right now, but very recently, we've gone through the shift from not only film to digital, but from DSLRs to mirrorless. And what I have found, which I think is so interesting, is that there's almost this apologetic nature in photographers if they're shooting on a DSLR, which is only like, you know, maybe it's even a recent DSLR. It's only like 3 years
Yeah,
old or something.
yeah.
There's this apologetic, like, I only took this with a DSLR. Sorry, like it's not mirrorless. I want to upgrade, but this is what I can afford. But at the same time, here you are shooting with a 50-year-old camera. I'm also like my professional camera that I would shoot weddings with is older than my daughter, who is in like elementary school now, because it still works great and I love it. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that it's kind of our consumer society of like always like newer is better. And it's always going to be automatically like the new one is always automatically going to be better than the old one. Like, yes, it might be an improvement. And one of the things I always love to tell people is when they start, pixel counting things, I'm like, you know how much resolution you need to like really gain any sort of meaningful difference? Like, you need to triple the number of megapixels to double the resolution. So if I have a 24 megapixel camera, that's basically twice the resolution of an 8 megapixel camera. Do you know how many years of difference that was between 8 megapixels and 24? That was a
Right.
while. There was
Yeah.
like, and I mean, we still have cameras like the R3 is 24 megapixels. Yes, there are new bells and whistles on things. I think that one, it can become a crutch for people to lean on to sort of like having the camera do all of the things for you. And it's funny because I'll be on various online forums and Facebook and Reddit, whatever, and you'll see people like trying to understand why their camera is doing a thing. Like why is it focusing over here? Or why is the exposure like way off? Like, well, again, I'm not trying to be if you need to know your equipment, whatever it is, whether it's a film camera that's 50 years old or it's a brand new mirrorless. When I switched, I mean not switched, I still use my DSLRs for things. I have an R5. When I like there's a difference in like the controls. One of the things I would say to Canon if I could talk to them is for people who making the switch from one to the other, it was not as intuitive as I would have liked it to be.
Really?
There were some things in like the controls that I was like, okay, you totally switched this to a different way, and it's not necessarily better. It's just different. I understood that the controls for things changed because the size of the camera changed. That's fine. But there were things like in the menus that they like made weird. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's this sort of feeling that people get that, oh, is if it's newer, it must be better.
But I think that there's been such a shift into you can't get what you want unless you have the newest.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's where I
Yeah.
think is the biggest problem.
Yeah, because I think that it's a misconception that you'll only be able to do it if you have the latest piece of equipment,
Right.
which is absolutely wrong. And it's one of those, okay, it's not the gear saying it's the photographer is true to an extent. Like, I mean, you could give me a phone and I could take some good pictures with a phone, depending on what it is. Like I've seen all of these on various photography websites, which will go nameless for now. So and so shot a wedding on an iPhone, and it's like, would I
Right.
do that for? No, they had like three other photographers there shooting with full on professional cameras, and they shot with it. Yeah, that's going to work for some pictures. I mean, I can get good, reasonable photos from my iPhone. I can get good photos from my film camera. I can get good photos from my old DSLRs. I know what I'm looking for and what I need for certain things. Like again, it's not the gear. Works to some extent. Depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah, you might need a better lens. You might need a different piece of. You might need some like lighting equipment to make your artistic vision work. But you don't necessarily need the top of the line piece of equipment or the most brand new thing to do the job. Like, I mean, we all suffer from gear acquisition syndrome. I need a new thing. I need a new thing. I think if we can all take a step back and look at what you actually have in your hand and think about what you're trying to create, that you can achieve your vision most likely with maybe a couple tweaks if you need like something else. But one of the things I love to do is I'll sit there and I go, oh, I want to do this shoot. I want to do something like this. And I look at it and go like, well, what gear do I need for that? And I'll go like, ah, do I really need a scrim that costs $3,000 to shoot this? And I can get some PVC piping and some fabric and whatever. I'll make it for $50. It doesn't have to be the top of the line. Cameras, when you said like, oh, cameras go obsolete very quickly. Do they?
Well,
Do they really go
quote
obsolete?
unquote obsolete,
Yeah.
according to every YouTube review.
Yes, because they're trying to sell new cameras.
Right.
It's like, it's not like Nikon and Sony and Canon and they're going like, you know what? You can still use that camera you bought 3 years ago. It's going to be pretty much just as good as the new one with some minor improvements here and there. And that's the thing. It's like we get into specification. Like, what are the specs? Oh, it can take one more, like the buffer is like one or two more images per second. You're not blowing me out of the water here. Like, yes, it's an improvement, but it's not like we went from a propeller plane to supersonic jet in like one step. It's
That'd be
there
great.
is yeah, it's a gradual building. Yes, a new mirrorless camera now is going to be better than a DSLR from 12 years ago. Yes, it's going to be better, but is it like light years ahead? No, it's that 12-year-old camera is still going to be able to take some quality images.
So then I'm going to take your own words here. You said that you could take a great photo with a phone. You could take a great photo with film cameras. You could take a great photo with your DSLR cameras. Why did you upgrade to mirrorless? What did going mirrorless? What did upgrading from a phone to a DSLR, like what did those things do for you? Why not just buy old gear?
I honestly upgraded to mirrorless. I started shooting more video.
Okay,
It's
so it
better for
helped
video.
you achieve something that you wanted.
Yeah, it's better for video than my DSLRs. Just better face tracking, and that was honestly like that. And the weight was a little bit better. I mean, there's some things I still don't care for out of mirrorless. Battery life
Were you shooting
is
video on your DSLRs?
yes, and I also had a dedicated video camera.
So what
Just
mirrorless
because
did is it made your job easier here.
yes, significantly for video. There are things that I love about it's the quality of the images are great. It's fantastic. The R5 is a powerful machine, and the more I use it, the more I like it, and it's great. But would I say that if you told me I couldn't use it and I had to use my Mark IV or my Mark III, I'd be like, all right. I mean, I'm not going to be like, okay, like, oh, it's terrible. My
Yeah.
life is, there's no way I can do this. I've got like on my shelf behind me. I don't know if you can see it. I've got a Mark II, a Mark III, and a Mark IV in amongst the stuff. I use them. I still use the Mark IV a lot. It doesn't, I don't think that the age of the gear is the most determining factor in creating quality images. I think that's you. I think again, like as much we say, like the gear doesn't matter. It's the photographer. It is the photographer. You have to be willing, and you don't have to apologize for you. I know, like I've seen people create amazing photos with like a point and shoot camera, not because they were like, oh, I've got to, like that's what they had. They were able to create great pictures. Yeah, like, you don't have to like sit there and apologize because you learned on a Canon Rebel, XTI or whatever. Like
Right.
it's like, and you're still taking good photos. It's the people who like come in and like, I have the latest gear. Look how amazing my picture is. That's you're just trying to tell people, oh, I was able to spend the money on the latest equipment as opposed to I really thought about what I needed. And when photographers who are starting out and they start asking like, oh, what would you do differently about your cameras or whatever? What would you do differently? And I always tell people I would invest in lenses before I would invest in cameras.
Right.
Just because lenses last. I mean, last. Like we said, they don't go obsolete, but I'm still using lenses that I've had for 10, 12, 15 years.
Oh, what about your Minoltas right there? How old are those lenses?
Those lenses, the film camera lenses, are again like probably from the 70s.
And light
Uh,
still enters the lens?
yeah.
Wow,
Yes.
that's amazing.
And I'm going to tell you, it's like something like these I've had since I was a teenager, which is a really long time. The only thing I've ever had done to these cameras is I had them professionally cleaned once about 15 years ago, and they fixed a couple of light leaks in the housing of the camera. That's it.
Yeah.
And then recently, just because I was, I've been shooting more film, and there's kind of since I am a Canon guy, I got this Canon AE1.
Oh, cool. That thing just looks like a tank. I love the look of the
It is. I
AE1.
mean, it's solid. It's just solid. And like, one of the things I like to do is just like one of the things I'm working on is when I go into New York City, like I'm just taking one of my film cameras and I'm going to snap some photos on the street.
Hmm.
That's it. It's just like, oh, like I'll see them later. Yeah, that's just sort of like a little treat for me.
Right, right.
But yeah, they work the same way as the SLR mirrorless thing is like, it's just some mirrors.
Hmm.
Like that's the difference. I mean, it's captured in the same sense of it's a lens that lets light in. You determine the aperture and the shutter speed. What are the golden triangle that we have between like, film sensitivity, whatever your sensor sensitivity, ISO, depending on who you are, aperture and shutter speed. It's all the same,
It's all the
whichever
same.
camera you're using.
Yeah. Every photo literally like ever taken uses those three elements, like
Right.
the shutter speed to an aperture and sensitivity on whatever it's
Yeah.
being captured on. Like that's it. That's all that it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And learn those things. That's why you learn, get things down to like where you really understand that. And that's when gear becomes less important.
Right.
If you really start to understand, and again, it depends on the type of picture. If I want something with some motion blur in it, I know that I might need a slightly longer exposure so that we capture that. Like, okay, well, how am I going to compensate with that? Am I going to compensate with sensitivity? Am I going to stop down a little bit so that we have a little bit more? Do I want more depth of field? Those sorts of things that when you start to understand the balance of each to get things right, you like
The whole world is
the camera you're
unlocked.
using. Right.
Yeah.
The camera you're using starts to become less and less important.
I think it's always funny looking at, like, at least maybe it's just me, the type of photos that I take. Sometimes I like taking the slow shutter photos to exaggerate that motion. No new camera could come out that could help me take better slow shutter photos. You know what I mean? Nobody's ever working to make a better 1/30th of a second or a 1/15th of a second. Everybody wants to go either faster or go higher on their ISO, which isn't really conducive to most photographs unless you're in like the right condition, I found. But they focus on that because it's better.
Yes. Yes. Focus.
No pun intended.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because where I would counter that is the types of sensors and what kind of noise you're picking up, and a longer exposure
Sure.
is better and whatever. Sure. Whatever.
Just to view on my
But yes,
iPhone. Yeah.
it's not a selling point of cameras to be like, oh, you can take longer exposures. And that's one of the things I've learned about, with film, shooting these film cameras, is just looking at the settings that you can choose. Like the highest setting you can go to for your shutter is 1,000
Yeah. Right.
of a second.
Yeah.
On one of in all three of these is a thousandth of a second. And it's just like, ew, okay.
If a camera came out today and could only go to 1/1000th of a second, like nobody would buy it. And yet for, almost 100 years, like that was the best that you could get. And people still were able to create incredible photos out of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at those photos. Like, there's like, I think some of the disconnect is go look at photos from the 20s and 30s or
90s.
whatever, the 90s, the the 1900s, the last century, the last millennium, or whatever. Yeah. Look at those photos and go like, oh, hey, they didn't have all of this stuff, and they were still capable of creating amazing. Like Ansel Adams was not out there like shooting at
F2.
128,000 ISO.
Yeah. When I was in high school and like it was time to get your license and stuff like that, I didn't want a car. I don't know why I didn't want a car. I just wanted a motorcycle. So when it came time to get a motorcycle, I thought, and if anybody knows motorcycles, like enjoy this story for what it is. But I wanted to buy a bike that was like 750 cc's, which is it's a good size bike. It's a big bike.
So it's a big boy bike.
Especially for a 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old. Not
it's a
a
lot
good
of
idea.
power for a 16-year-old kid.
Yes. And my mom had said, you know what, maybe let's look for like a 250. And I almost like laughed at her because I thought a 250 is like, I don't even think I can go on the freeway with a 250. Like that is
She
so
was like, "Yeah, you can."
exactly. Yeah. Looking back, that's probably exactly what she was thinking. So I ended up getting a 250, right? And it was underpowered. There was so much that this bike was lacking. And I realize now looking back that getting that 250, getting that thing that was not the best, getting that bike that was like 15 years old at that point, that was underpowered, that every time I'd come up to a light and there was another guy on a motorcycle right there, like they would laugh at me, made me a better rider for
Yeah,
when it came time that I was ready to upgrade to a 750. I knew more about the basics of riding a motorcycle than I would have if I just got a 750 as my first bike. And I kind of see photography in that same way of get the cheapest thing. Literally, get the cheapest thing. Figure out how you want to use the camera. In
right,
my case, figure out how you want to ride a motorcycle, like
exactly.
where you see fit. And then when it comes time to get the thing that you want, you're going to be ready for it. You're not going to be constantly looking for the best of the best because you already have that solid foundation. So I think it's like, as you said, if you build that solid foundation and then the power comes to us and
Right,
not the camera, and then we
right.
can, I don't know, I don't want to say dictate how we use our gear, but it's easier that way.
It is, and it's like cameras are dumb. As much as people wanna, like, say, like, the cameras are dumb. They do what you tell them to do,
Right.
and, like, exposure modes, the number of people who don't understand exposure modes kinda staggers me, and, like, how the camera sees things. And they're like, "Oh, why isn't my camera, like, exposing correctly for I wanna how do I create this kinda shot?" Like, if I had a penny for every time I've seen a post that said, "How do I create this type of photo?"
Right.
Yeah, I'd probably have, 10 or 20 bucks, but
It's a good amount of
the
pennies. Yeah. In pennies,
yeah,
that's a lot of
a good amount
pennies.
of pennies. But the thing is, like, understanding how your camera sees the world and being able to make it capture that picture is your job as the photographer. And it goes right back, we were talking about get the cheapest thing. Goes right back to what we were talking about earlier about the film cameras is these are manual exposure. If I have a limited number of exposures to shoot, I really have to be thoughtful and intentional. And that makes my life so much easier when I then go out and shoot with my mirrorless camera, which can do all sorts of fancy things, but I know how to lock in for my goal. And I know how to use that piece of equipment when I get there. Yeah, it's again like if I learned on a two-seater Cessna, whatever, how to fly, and then you just like instead you plop me in a jet, and I'm like, there's like 1,000 different buttons in here. Like what?
Yeah.
It was like one of my favorite parts of Top Gun Maverick is when the kid gets in the back seat. Like when Miles Teller gets in the back, he's like, "How, there's like 800 fuses in here. Like I don't what do I do?" He's like, "I don't know. Your dad just figured that stuff out."
Yeah.
Like it's there's all these bells and whistles that you don't understand. Yeah, like lock down those foundational elements and then you can use the features of that newer gear to your advantage in a better way. That
Or
makes sense.
choose the right, better gear
Right.
because now you know
Right.
what it is that you want and what,
Choose the gear that works for you
yeah.
and what you're trying to accomplish as opposed to, oh, I saw some guy on YouTube and he has this camera and these lenses and says that those are the most awesome lenses in the world. It's the I don't know, social media thing that gets me like that grinds my gears, makes me shake my fist at a cloud is the here are my camera settings for this photo.
Oh, right. Because nobody can use that. It's not going to be
What
the
good
same
is
light
that to
outside.
anyone?
Yeah.
Right.
I know.
Guess what? Lighting conditions might be completely different when you're out there. That doesn't guarantee you the same photo. And I think that there's trying to take that shortcut instead of understanding why those camera settings work in that particular situation, as opposed to saying these are the camera settings that you should use.
Well, I
I
watched a
use them.
video the other day. In the video, somebody was talking about they went out on a photo walk and shared all their camera settings. And then in the comments, like one of the first comments was somebody saying, "Thank you so much for sharing these settings. Like nobody else wants to share their settings. It's like they're keeping some sort of secret." And that was the most liked comment. And I was like, there's such a disconnect here. I think people aren't sharing their settings because if you're a competent photographer, you know those settings aren't going to
Right,
work literally for anybody else in any lighting
right.
situation ever. That's what it was right there for them. It's
Yeah,
not that there's gatekeeping going on, but at the same time, new photographers, they need to start somewhere. They're
right.
looking for some sort of answers. So it's a hard balance to find, I think.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, and I can appreciate that starting out mentality and going like, "Oh, what is this?" And that is one of the things that I think that digital really makes it easy for you starting out. But you have to look at your settings. And I think that maybe that's the thing that I don't know. We're in such a rush to create a whole bunch of content all the time.
Yeah, because everybody else does.
Right. And like this endless cycle of trying to like get stuff out as quickly as possible has probably led to a lot of the AI issues. It's like, oh, I can just, if I do this for an hour one day, I can create enough stuff for the whole week, as opposed to going out, shooting, coming back, looking at the photos, looking what were my settings? What settings did I use and what isn't good about like what didn't land for me in this photo or what did? Like this is great. And then understanding like, okay, well that's when I shot with like at a lower ISO and a slightly higher aperture, blah blah blah. Like that's when things really clicked in. Oh, how was the light when that happened? Oh, okay. Like that's what you like making those connections between what settings you use as opposed to looking at somebody else's settings when you have no idea what the light was like or what the situation was. And then just going, okay, well, I'm just going to use their settings and then go from there. And then get mad when I come back and like complain in the comments, going, "I used your settings. I didn't get a photo anything like this."
Or
Um,
worse, I used your settings and my photos are garbage. I must have to upgrade to the new
right.
A70
I must need
million 4 Mark 7 or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Suddenly
I
it's
must
not
need
the other
the mirrorless.
YouTuber's fault. It's not their fault. It's their camera's fault. You got to upgrade. That's how they get
Yeah,
you.
yeah. The cameras, like I said, cameras are dumb.
Cameras are dumb.
Cameras,
Cameras are dumb. So then let me ask you another question here because I feel like I think if somebody's listening, they get the point now about cameras.
yeah.
And hopefully they feel like, oh, maybe my Rebel is good enough because it is.
You're good enough, and so is your camera.
You are
New
good
T-shirt idea.
enough.
New T-shirt idea. Called it.
Would that sell? I wonder if that would sell. Make it. I want to
I don't
know.
know.
I want to know.
We'll
Okay.
see.
But so like, let's talk about other gear real quick. In particular, flash, because
Yep.
I hear a lot of pushback from photographers about using flash. And I mean, this has been going on for a number of years with natural light photographers, whether they use natural light because it looks a certain way or simply because it's too complicated. But now I feel like as we continue to progress and now we have things like mirrorless and the technology gets better and the ISO performance is better and now there's in-body stabilization so you can shoot at a lower shutter speed and things like this. I feel like that conversation continues to get magnified. Like, what's the point of flash? Where do you fall on that? Do you see a time where you could potentially shoot a whole wedding without flash?
No, I don't. Again, depends on the scenario. If I'm in a dark space, and here is what I've always. Flash is another tool to have in your toolbox for when the situation arises where the photos are not going to look good. Even if you the thing that it's getting slightly better, and I would say that on my this is one of the things about having newer gear that at a higher ISO, God, like Rob Hall, like oh, it's the ISO thing in my head, yeah, whatever. Anyway, higher sensitivity, there's more color depth at higher sensitivities now, and I can say that I can shoot something probably at 3200 on my R5, and it will still have pretty decent color depth.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get it up in like 10,000s, 20,000s and higher, the colors start to get really muddy. And if you're shooting a wedding, it depends on what you're going for. If I'm shooting black and white, I'm not so concerned about
Right.
it. But if I'm shooting color and I want those colors to look good and I don't want it to just be like completely ambient lighted, because sometimes the ambient light looks terrible. Sometimes you've got like some amber gels
Look at you right now
going. Oh,
with
and I'm
with the
so washed
skylight.
out.
Yeah.
I'm so washed out. I look terrible. Like it's just like the whole forehead, which is expansive as it starts anyway, is just like completely washed out and makes me think I've got to get a new sort of diffuser over my skylight to play with that light. I think that flash for a lot of people, especially people who term themselves natural light photographers, I know how what listen, I thought flash was imposing when I was starting out and I was a natural light photographer.
Really?
It wasn't a thing then. I just used a lot of natural light because I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to do with this flash. But I also used reflectors a lot for portraits to like modify the light, like bounce the light back and get the light that I needed. And then my flash at that point was sort of mostly TTL flash and
So like an auto
yeah,
mode.
auto, yes, an automatic mode, and then learning not to point. If I was going to point it at somebody, I needed to diffuse it a little bit or bounce it off of something, but like bouncing it off of things that didn't affect the color of the light. Is the ceiling wood? Because if I bounce it off of a wood ceiling, I'm automatically going to get some browns and reds and yellows in there that I might not want. So yeah, they're like understanding the light more, how it moves, and the inverse square law. It all seems like so overwhelming at first. I think that using like some auto modes on there, like when you're starting out, can help you feel a little bit more comfortable. But like putting it on manual and like getting again, it's that getting out and practicing with the gear makes you feel a little bit more like understanding. I understand now when I go to a wedding what settings based on the size of the room. Am I pointing it directly into the dance floor? Am I bouncing it off the ceiling? I know what settings I need to use on my like off camera lights. Basically, almost like I can dial it in within probably a range of power of one or two,
Hmm.
usually like pretty fast.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you sometimes you need to adjust because it gets darker over the course of the evening or whatever. And that's one of the great things about having a transmitter on your like the wonders
Oh yeah.
of, now it's so much easier. Like when I started off trying to use on camera flash or off camera flash, it was like a pocket wizard that had no power
Just
control
on or
on it,
off. Yeah.
just on or off.
Walk
And
over
you
to
had
the
to like sit,
stand, bring it
yeah,
down,
oh, it's gotta be
adjust it,
lower.
send it back up,
Scales.
try it. That wasn't right. Go back
That
over, bring
sucked.
it. Yeah, I
Oh,
know. The
yeah.
worst. Yeah.
Now it's just like, oh, I just like dial it in. Oh, wait, needs to be a little brighter. Needs to be a little darker. I have zones of, flash I can use. And that can seem very overwhelming at first. And I know that feeling. It really did feel that way for me when I started out. But how I learned was again by practicing. And sometimes there's a great saying that's like, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you're never going to make anything original or worthwhile.
I'm writing that down.
It's Sir Ken Robinson. I got it like sitting on my desk, and that's I think that's fairly accurate as far as the saying goes. But like, it's true. If you're not willing to make mistakes, and I think this is okay. This may be the thing that younger or more inexperienced photographers, and probably a lot of older photographers, is probably across the board. A lot of things. People are afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid they're going to get judged. They're afraid they're going to put something out there that people are just going to rip apart because the internet is a place where people love to make their comments on other people's work. Especially one of my absolute favorites is when people comment on my stuff and I go to look at their profile and they don't have a picture of themselves or like really any other images in there, like or it's a private account,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm like, you're not putting yourself out there to be judged, but yet you're like totally happy to like go out there and like just
Do it to
tear
everybody
apart
else.
people's
Yeah.
right. Exactly. It's just like yeah, okay, troll, whatever.
Well, I mean, they've watched enough YouTube videos, so they know how photography works. Yeah.
I've watched two,
Yeah.
and that makes me an expert.
They're still waiting to buy their
Um,
first camera, but they've watched enough videos. Yeah.
exactly. A lot of them. I think that it's the fear of failing in some way, or which is probably the whole thing of apologizing for your gear is like, I'm sorry, my gear is the not up to snuff because that's why I failed. And it's you have to be willing to for it not to work because that's how you learn. And that's why I am a big proponent of practice, practice, practice. Then when you have the gig, you better understand your gear and what you can do with it when that rolls around and you don't have the time to sit and go, what will happen if I adjust the power this way? And I used to sit in my apartment with my flashes and just take pictures of myself. And I hate having my picture taken, but just like using like to see what the different power settings at different distances, how it affected. And, I still hate trying to explain the inverse square law and how like light dissipates over distances and whatever, and like what the power settings need to be the farther and further away the subject is. But if you can mentally wrap your head around the fact that like why you need more power the further something is away from the light source, and that the bigger the light
Hmm.
source, the softer the light, which is why we use things like diffusers and soft boxes and umbrellas and things like that, is to create a bigger, softer light than just like, here's the bare bulb head of my flash. Once you start to get a sense of those things, it doesn't seem as daunting
Right.
anymore.
Right.
It's not a matter of somebody handing you the keys to your motorcycle that is way overpowered for you, and just saying like, well, this is what I learned out, or this is what I use now that I've been here. I'm 25 years into this, and now this is what I ride. Go ahead, try that out. Because that's basically what handing over camera settings and like flash settings, whatever, is like, oh, I used 1/500th power on my whatever. It's like, okay, well, again, it doesn't, unless you have some sort of background knowledge of what the lighting was like and why they chose those settings, it's really kind of pointless.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Hands on.
I love it. I love all this fun stuff and even kind of exploring these wild topics. But Casey, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. Before I let you go, listeners hear that beautiful velvety voice of yours and they want to hear more. So let us know where we can do that.
You can find me on all of the socials at the nerdy photo, all one word, no dots, underscores, or dashes, at the nerdy photo on TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, formerly known as Twitter, Threads, etc. And you can find the Nerdy Photographer podcast on all major podcast platforms. Come give it a listen. It's fun.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Start a conversation. Grow together. That is it for this week. Remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.